Hello, everyone. Today I have Ola and Brittany back on the channel because we are going to talk about star ratings, which is a very interesting topic for all three of us, I'm sure. And we're just going to be discussing our evolving thoughts on this topic, not saying that this is how we feel for everyone. These are just our own personal perspectives. We are not saying whether people should use star ratings or not use star ratings. But before we get into the discussion, I'll go ahead and let Ola and Brittany introduce themselves and their channels. So we'll go ahead and start with Ola.
Hi, my name is Ola and my channel is The Wild Witch. I talk about books mainly. I sometimes do tarot or witchy related content as well. And I also started making kind of a photographic little blogs with clips and photography that I take of my life and my surroundings. So if any of that interests you, that's what I do.
I'm Brittany with Books with Brittany. And I feel like my intro is a little different this year because now I read more of a variety of like speculative, magical realism, and sci-fi and fantasy, and literary fiction. So a bit of everything.
Fantastic. In this discussion, we're talking about star ratings. And I know, Brittany, that you did a video about star ratings a while back. This was several months ago now, right? And Ola did one more recently. I know this has been a little bit of a topic that's come up in our community lately. And so maybe just for an introduction, tell us your thoughts, like where you are with star ratings, maybe your background with star ratings. And I guess I'll go last in discussing where I've come from with this topic.
So yeah, I made the video about a very strong stance about why I think star ratings are important. And this is something I go back and forth on all the time because I constantly feel like it's very difficult to rate a book on like a star rating value system. And so I get frustrated with it. And then I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I have sort of just like a brief general overview. I've always done it in the past. And as of now, I'm sticking with it for a couple different reasons. I'm sure we'll touch on those later. But so as a reviewer, I'm going to continue using star ratings. And as a viewer of BookTube, I really do enjoy and look for the star rating in other reviewers just for my personal enjoyment, not necessarily like if I'm going to choose to read that book or not. That might not be the determining factor, but it's fun for me to know how somebody rated a book.
Okay, interesting. And I'm sure we'll get into, because I know you talked recently too about having some varying thoughts about star ratings, which we'll get into. So I'm curious to hear about that in a little bit. But Ola, go ahead and share with us your particular view on stars.
So I started off by using star rating pretty much as anyone else, mostly because that's what was offered to me on Goodreads, which is the website that I was introduced to when I discovered BookTube. And I never thought much of it. Eventually, when I got my own channel and started actually reviewing the books, I started experimenting with star rating to better understand how to rate things in a more consistent way. So I did several different spreadsheets to calculate the perfect star rating, basically. And I had lots of fun creating them. And after this recent discussion that I made my own video, really what I wanted to do was acknowledge a lot of the things that were brought up by people who do not use star ratings, but also bring about what I thought were the positive of star ratings. I just started experimenting, not using star ratings and using something different that maybe we can talk about more on in this discussion, I suppose. And I am doing this now just as an experiment, and we'll see how it goes.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think from there, we can go ahead and get into the positives of star ratings because there are certainly some positives. Oh, and I guess I could talk a little bit about myself too, really quickly about star ratings. So, same as Ola, basically, I started using star ratings because of Goodreads. And I've always felt a little like I've always struggled with it, honestly, partly being an indecisive person. And I have recently stopped using star ratings, and I'll get into why a little bit later in this video, but I do agree that they can have value and that there is, like, as we're going to discuss here, it can be fun. It can be fun to see what people rate a book, to see a snapshot, I guess, of how somebody felt about a book. So do you two have anything more to say about that, about how you look at star ratings? And I think there also can be a difference here between looking at Goodreads and seeing the average of star ratings for a book versus looking at Goodreads and seeing what your individual friends or people you know in the community said about a book.
I think that the average rating never impacted me. It's something that honestly, and this is probably me being dumb, I don't know, I never noticed it before those videos where people would read the books with the highest or lowest star rating on Goodreads started become very popular on BookTube. Before that, I did not even realize that was a thing. And the only way I was using star rating, which I still believe is the way that I found them the most valuable, is when people would quickly go through their list of friends and see their basically immediate reaction to a book, just as a reminder, like who did enjoy this and who did not enjoy this. That is the way that I have always used and found star rating the most useful, to be honest.
Wonderful. What about you, Brittany?
I was kind of having a side thought while you were talking about that as well, because it's sort of a way to tier rank books, right? Like we know what tier ranking videos are, and I'm doing one soon of all the books I read in 2021, and I'm thinking, like, how do I make these titles, right? And it's really just a way to do that, and you're placing a numerical value with no explanation behind it. But when you do a tier ranking, you're going to explain what your ranks are. So I think that is sort of like an important process that goes along with star ratings. But for me, it's kind of like what you were saying a lot too, where it's like a quick way to see what my friends thought. Or I also never looked at the average rating on Goodreads, and I actually still don't, even once I found out about it. Like, it doesn't have any influence whether I'm going to pick up the book or not. But it is that initial way in my brain. I finish the book and I'm like, where does this belong? I would say when I first finish a book, like, that star rating doesn't mean very much to me, and it changes later on, and that's when it's frustrating, because I oftentimes change what the rating is, and then it's frustrating because I have to go back and remember to do it. But when I'm watching someone's channel, which we'll get to the poll that I took later, because I feel like a lot of viewers feel the same way. When I'm watching someone's channel, because you kind of become invested in the person's personality and characteristics and reading taste, if you're spending a lot of time watching their channel and reviews, then you just sort of want to know, okay, but did you like it? Like, you can see, okay, there's all the, and that's what made me so passionate when I made that Let's Talk video, because I saw so many fabulous reviews. I mean, really in-depth, pointing out the strengths and the weaknesses of the book. And that's great, because then you can determine if it's something that you are interested in based on that information given to you. But I'd be like, so tell me, like, did you like it? Like, you know what you get what I mean?
So what's the tea?
Yeah, it's like, did you have a fun time reading it? Is it something that you'd like give to your best friend, not just here's the good and here's the bad? Because at times it can make someone's opinions seem lukewarm when you try to take out the personal factor. And because I'm such a personal, like, relatable type of reader, I want to know that personal opinion.
That's a really good point. Usually I feel like I am looking for clues in how the person talks about those talking points to figure out, if they liked it or didn't like it. But of course we want to know. And this goes into a lot of different areas, I think. I know that for me personally, when this is the challenge that I have with rating. So you mentioned one of them already that I wanted to discuss in this video discussion here, which is that your opinions can change over time. So does that happen to you too at all? I guess I'm seeing Brittany nod. Does that happen to you, Ola? Because it happens to me quite a bit. Like, if I look back at so many of the books that I gave 5 stars, I don't know that I would necessarily think of those as like favorites, or think of them as fondly as I did at the time. And there are a number of books where the reverse is true, where I wasn't as sure about the book when I finished it. And then over time, that opinion changed dramatically. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that absolutely happens to me as well. More in the way that I thought I enjoyed the book more, and then I find myself wanting to lower the star rating, because in the situation where I finish a book and I'm not sure, there are books that I am expecting that they have a chance to grow on me eventually. I know which one they are. For example, a great example of that is Vita Nostra by Sergei and Marina Diachenko. When I read it last year in January, I gave it like what I thought it was a 4.5. And spoiler for my best book of the year is going to be my favorite book that I have read in 2021. Not because everything else was worse, but because it grew so much on me and I knew that it was going to, but it's just a mind twisting book. So it makes sense that it takes time to really grow on you. And that is what I'm talking about with those kind of books.
Yeah, excellent.
I think that I totally agree with you. And I find that it is less frequent that I want to raise my rating, because you sort of get caught up in emotions. And if there's like a plot twist or something, that makes you excited, it leaves you with that impression of like, oh, that was so good. And then later you're like, okay, none of that stuck with me. Was it really as good as I thought?
What was that about?
Yeah. And so where I struggle is as a reviewer online, that can, I don't want to say be harmful, because really we're not harming anybody. But for example, I got a comment on one of my videos today that made me think of this, because they were like, I was going to DNF this book and I saw you gave it a 3.5. And I was like, it has to get better somewhere, because she gave it a 3.5. Well, I put it on my least favorite books of the year list, because after time I was like, this is one of my least favorite books of the year. And so if people are looking to you for that information, it feels misleading. And I definitely, there are so many popular books that I read before I had a BookTube channel or before I was a more critical reader. And so people will see my Goodreads star rating and be like, oh, she loved that. I gave everything 5 stars when I started reading. And now I'm like, disregard any star rating you see on books on Goodreads if it is not like 2020 forward, and maybe not even 2020. And I have books in 2019. So.
I feel the same way. I'm just like, oh man, if you look back at my old ratings, it just doesn't feel like it represents me at all anymore. And that's the challenge, is that sometimes, you look at what your friends rated a book, and you would have to consider when they read it, and how much their taste has changed. So that's another factor to bring in here, is that our tastes change over time. And if we've had a Goodreads account for a decade or less, or, whatever, it's probably not going to be reflective of our reading taste or how we feel anymore.
I think it's time to expose myself and how impulsive I can be. So I told you that I was doing this experiment of not using star rating, right? Well, I was extremely bothered going through my old star rating and seeing that some things were really off and were really not reflecting what I would say today. And since I was into this experiment of not using star rating and I could not sleep that night, I removed all of my star ratings from Goodreads, because at this point, I'm going to start fresh.
Yeah.
It took me a long while, and Goodreads kicked me off at one point.
But that's got to be a great feeling, to be honest. If I could have someone do that to my account, that's got to feel good.
Yeah, that was great. I was logged off in me. What happened there? It did not allow me to remove the star ratings anymore. And then I finished the day after, the ones that I could not do that on that night. But honestly, I got a laugh out of it. And what I'm doing now, since I'll really talking about this, is very quick. Exactly what you said, Brittany, about the tier ranking thing. I thought that if I was going to use a new system for myself, it could not be on a 5-tier scale, because otherwise it was just going to be a different name from the same thing. And I was going to just trade one thing for the next identical one. So I took what I found useful about star rating and what I found that does not change over time that much. If I like a book a lot, if I just like it, okay, or if I didn't like it. It's so basic, it's just so absolutely basic that it's not needing of an explanation. And that's honestly what I'm using. I put 3 little smiley faces, happy, neutral, and sad. And I type, I really like it. I like it, okay. I didn't like it. And that's what I'm doing. If you go through my books read in 2021, you can see that on those, because that's what I used to experiment is and see how I was feeling with it.
Mhm.
And so far, I'm feeling pretty good about it because I do not foresee starting to immediately hate a book that I really liked. So I think this can work pretty well for me and keeps what I personally like about star reading, which is the immediate reminder of, did she like it or not? Because you see it, it's written, it's typed for you there. And even though I'm not using the stars, you can get the same result out of it. At least I hope.
That's interesting. And it kind of goes back to the like fun part about rating, because I love that you're using kind of emoticons in your system. Is that I know a lot of people do this in their discords too. They have a section where it says rate my book, and people will use emoticons to sort of rate their books, which is
I never
really
saw that.
cute. It's a really cute thing.
Yeah.
So like if there's blood in the title, they'll like do the blood emoticon or something, or if it's like about a bird, they'll do a bird emoticon, that kind of thing. And it's cute and it's fun. And so I just don't want to devalue that, because I definitely think that that has a place and that needs to be acknowledged, just the fun part, because we're reading for fun. That's very much an important part of this. And also just tailoring this back to what Brittany said too about, you know, did you like it? And would you recommend this? Would you buy this for your friend? So I feel like all those things do have value. But as far as the rating itself, this is where things get a little bit complicated too, in addition to tastes changing over time, is that the elaborate sort of systems we come up with to rate books. Now, I know, Ola, you did a video about this actually last year, and about how it was just very simple for you. You just basically went by 5 stars, I loved it. 4 stars, I strongly liked it. 3 stars, I liked it okay.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was even simpler than that, meaning that I was looking at, you know, those quizzes where you have no, yes, maybe, and then the other 2 spots in between. That's it. I like it the most, I like it the least, neutral, or anything in between. It's just that simple for me, just like me. I don't know. That was what I was doing with star rating, but it's too variable for me.
yeah. And I know, Brittany, you use not only half stars, don't you use quarter stars? So it's broken down.
I think.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I filmed a video today talking about goals next year, and I'm not gonna do quarter stars anymore.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, but I always have. Yes.
Yeah. Any
I did
particular?
use both half stars and quarter stars for a while, and that's why I had created one of the many complex spreadsheets that would translate exactly the number into a perfect star rating compatible with Goodreads.
Whoa.
What can I say? I don't even know myself.
Yeah, no, I find those grading videos, there are people who do like whole systems, elaborate systems, either the compile system or other kinds of systems. And those are
I had one of that
fascinating.
too, my spreadsheets.
Yeah, I think those can be really, really fascinating. But this sort of leads to one of the challenges. And I know I discussed this part a little bit with Philip Chase over on his channel recently, which is that there are different types of story, there are different types of narrative. And sometimes if we go into a story with the sort of compile system, that particular system, for example, I don't remember what all those letters represent. One is characters, I think one is atmosphere and world building and that kind of thing. And there are no themes. There are no themes. There's not a themes label there. And so if the story is a heavily themed one, if it's about the themes, then you don't really have a section for that sort of system. And so this is another challenge with star ratings, is that it doesn't usually translate well to different forms of storytelling. And I wonder, Brittany, if you could speak about this, because I know as you said, you've been branching out to so many different types of genres lately. Have you found that that affects the way that you rate things?
So I would say that if I did a rating system like that, it absolutely would. And that's sort of part of the reason why I don't like to use a system like that. And I think it's sort of similar to how I had to make two different videos of my favorites, because in my mind, I cannot compare like classic strict fantasy and sci-fi to my favorite literary fiction and nonfiction books. In my brain, they cannot combine in favorites, because it doesn't make sense. I can't make sense of it in my mind.
No, yeah.
And so it would be sort of like that. I'd have to come up with several different rating systems depending on the genre. And for me, that's too technical. Like I appreciate those who have their particular rating systems where they go through and they do, I haven't looked that much into it. So I don't know if it's like 1 out of 10 for each category and then they do the math.
Yes.
I'm not sure how that works.
1 out of 10, and then it turns into 5 stars.
For me, my rating, it kind of like with favorites, is entirely about feeling. Like it is simply a feeling. So if you see my star ratings on Goodreads and you're like, okay, so this must be like extremely well written, whatever. Like, no, it's literally how I felt when I finished that book. And that's why sometimes it might not be helpful for people looking for an informative review, because if I'm saying it's completely based on enjoyment, then how does that help you know if you're going to enjoy the book? Unless you follow my channel enough to know you enjoy the same things as me, which that's one of the other reasons that I think it can be helpful for certain viewers. But yeah, so I really don't have any technical way of rating books that has to change based on like genre to genre. It's simply the feeling that the book gave me. The only one that I find a little more challenging to rate is nonfiction. I find like that to be tricky to rate for some reason. But yeah, when you do it just based on how you feel, you can't go too wrong. You can't tell me my feelings wrong.
Yeah, you can't go too wrong. But I think it's also worth noting that not everybody rates according to feeling too. So if you're looking at people's rating, like some people do go by a very systematized, elaborate sort of evaluation. And for example, one of my friends recently did a video and he was talking about this series that was recommended to him and that he really enjoyed the series. He thought that they were so much fun. They were super entertaining. He said, I gave most of the books 2 stars because because he said a lot of things could have been cut out, but they were super entertaining. And it really caught me off guard. And I commented on that. I said, I would have never guessed that you enjoyed your time reading books that were 2 stars. But it really kind of came down to just the fact that he thought that a lot of things could be cut out. And so I think that's important to note that not everybody, when you see ratings on Goodreads, not everybody is rating based on their enjoyment. They're rating on different things. So if I had seen those 2-star ratings, I would have thought, okay, that person hated those books. And that wasn't the case at all. So, and even the same with like 3 stars, I think you had said, Brittany, that you still liked a lot of books that were 3 stars, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I definitely, 3 stars means I still recommend it. It just wasn't like, it didn't wow me. So, for example, my middle category for the tier ranking that would be a 3-star is going to be categorized like, thank you, next. Like, okay, cool, let's move on. You know what I mean? But I think that that's where we have a little more freedom, maybe as a like video reviewer. Is I say all the time on my channel how my ratings are based on feelings at the time being. So that's easier than when you just see like a Goodreads review where if somebody didn't say like frequently, like this is how I base my ratings. So we can have a little bit more explanation. And especially since a lot of viewers kind of stick with certain reviewers for a certain amount of time, like you can get to know those things, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at a 2-star rating from a friend, I would be like, they did not like, nope, that was a no.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be hard to tell from
Yeah.
looking at that. Yeah, this is where also I have a challenge with star ratings for me personally, and this is why I've kind of gotten away from them, is that, sometimes some of the books that I've read last year, for example, were very, very long, and they gave me a mixture of feelings. And sometimes the book went one direction with my emotions and then went a totally other direction with my emotions. And I know when some people have that experience, and in fact, I talked to there was one book that did that for me last year. And I talked about this with some people in Discord, and they said, oh, yeah, that was a 2-star book until like the last quarter. And then it was a 5-star book. So I gave it 4 stars. And so it's like, it's still so mathematical. And for me, I just felt like the level of emotions I did go through, I couldn't quite reduce it to a number in that way. Like the math part, it just didn't quite work with the emotion part. It just was too mixed up. And plus, like, as far as like emotions are concerned, yes, definitely some books will, like, personally for me, emotionally impact me way more than others. But there are so many different types of emotional experiences. So, like, sometimes you can read a book and just feel just this sense of inspiration and wonder and wanting to be in this world. And then you can have this sort of, and I guess this kind of goes back to genre a little bit, but not necessarily. Even within genres, you can have an experience where the book is just devastating and you are crying, and that's a different type of emotional response, or you're laughing a lot. So it can have a variety. There could be a variety of emotional experiences or aesthetic experiences with books, but trying to put a number to it, for me personally, can be really kind of, it just confuses my brain. It feels a little bit reductive for me personally. But any thoughts on that?
I feel that the problem for me is how a number is so ideally tied to a value, not really an expression of my own enjoyment, which is actually what, like you and Brittany, I try to do with a rating, or an externation of that kind of sort, which can be star rating or what I'm doing now with the little emojis and stuff like that. But it's not a value that I want to put on a book, especially because, as we were saying, we are not really necessarily talking about anything practical or specific or literary in the text. We are not talking necessarily about the plot, the characters, the this and that. It's more my enjoyment, my reaction, my experience with this book. And so giving it a value, I think, can be misleading, at least for me. That's what I'm realizing now, because I don't want anyone to think that the way I enjoy or do not enjoy a book gives or takes away the value from something. And that's not it. I am no one. Okay. And as I was telling Brittany and Joanne before, a simple example: I hate strawberries. Everyone in the world loves strawberries. I hate strawberries. Does this mean that strawberries are evil? Yes, they are evil, but no. What I'm trying to say is exactly that. I am just one person, and I do not want that my enjoyment and my emotions can dictate the value on something. I just want you to know, if you care, how my enjoyment and my experience was.
Yeah.
I like what you said there a lot, actually. And I also like what you were saying about the number almost reducing the experience and just giving this numerical value, making that what the book is at the end of the day when people are looking at it online. And to an author, it's hard because I think authors probably want book ratings because that people look for them. People look for star ratings to buy a book. And then it gets hard because if you are in the middle, do you round up? Do you round down? Like, you don't want to have it be harmful for an author in most circumstances anyways. Just because you didn't like a book, you don't want to discourage others from picking that book up. So there's so many, like, I feel like there are so many difficulties and not that problems, but I can't think of a better word than that right now for using star ratings, because it can cause complications. So I think that I don't know, like, I'm just kind of thinking, because like I said, when we were chatting about having this conversation, I was like, I don't know, I hope I get some clarity. Like maybe I'll figure out what the heck I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe I can just make it super clear that like you have to listen to what I'm saying more than just the number. But with the number of people that really ask me like not to remove the star ratings, then I would feel bad doing that, because I don't necessarily think that it's extraordinarily harmful for me to include a number if it helps other people and they enjoy seeing the number. I think that that is kind of what made me, rather than my own personal desire, because I don't really care if I rate the book. It doesn't bring me personal joy to assign a number value to a book that I read, if that makes sense. I would like to hear how you guys feel. If anything, it's stressful. But if it helps other people and other people enjoy it, just keep giving it that feeling rating.
That's a really good question. For me, it's a little, this is the reason I haven't been reading recently, is that it's been more stressful for me than ever, especially because, and I know not everybody does this is just me and my way of overthinking things, but it had gotten to the point where I'd be reading a book and I'd be pausing and thinking, is this a 3-star book or is this a 4-star book? I think this is going to be a 5-star book. And I hated it. I hated getting in my head too much about books. I hate doing that in general. I'd rather not be too analytical when I'm reading a book. And I'm not saying everyone who rates does that. I think most people don't overthink it. They just read the book and then I'm assuming they just read the book and assign a number. But for me, it just was actually decreasing my enjoyment a little bit to reduce my experience down in that way to a numerical value. And it is a good question, though, about authors. And I wonder how authors feel when they see ratings, because I mean, I guess I've heard mixed things. I've heard that the numbers usually help authors. And I know Ola brought up too about the problem with Goodreads in her video and how people will rate books before they're even released, which is ridiculous that that's even allowed. But I also think too about indie authors and self-published authors. And I think they need those ratings a little bit more than other people, sadly. And then it's hard because you're trying to assess them according, if you're being an honest reviewer and trying to rate them compared to somebody who has a professional editor, and how do you assign a value in that way? So all these things are really important questions to consider, I think.
Those are things that I have actually considered a little bit. This is what I came up with. I honestly do not think I have the knowledge nor the skills to give a rating that is going to impact the ability to be sold, to be bought and read by people. I do not have the skill of judging a book like that and giving it that kind of yes or no for a general audience. I think that I have simply my own self and my own enjoyment to give to the audience that chose to follow me. And that's different. Though, if I started to be approached by authors, publishers, especially indie authors, to read and review one of their books, then I would make a conscious effort that knowing that accepting that review, that arc or whatever, would mean that I'm also offering a feedback they can use. In that specific occasion, I think that I would read the book in a different way that I normally do, which is for enjoyment, because I read for enjoyment, for my own personal hobby and free time. And that's what I do. If I decided to pick on an arc or a review copy or something like that, that would be a conscious effort. And in that case, even though I'm not using star rating anymore currently, and so far I'm happy with that, I would use star rating because I am basically telling you, yes, of course, I'm going to help you promote your book with an honest opinion. So whether it's positive or negative, I am promising that in exchange for the book and reading it. So that's basically my stance. There are people who are reviewers as a job, and that's their job, to give a rating and to basically tell the world if this book is worth buying or not. This is not my job. I'm a graphic designer. What can I say?
But you also have a bigger influence than you probably realize too, having a channel and having friends in the
Yes,
community. So
but
I,
my influence can be given by my reviews and by also my too long did not read kind of little segment saying I like it, I did not like it, or I like it okay. People can be absolutely influenced by that, but that does not input in the system. That is not something that can be counted and picked on by the system. It does not influence what the website can count on, because no one on Goodreads or on Amazon goes and check into my reviews if I like the book or not. So I am not directly making a good or bad thing to anyone. I am just being my own little self, unless someone asks me to be a reviewer for them.
Sometimes I think that when it comes to reviews, though, talking about qualifications, um, sometimes I think that the opinions that I look to more so are people that are like me or relatable to me, because um, I think like your opinion is still important, even if, you know, even if me or you or any of us is not technically qualified in, with a degree, with a background and history of critically reviewing books, I still think that it is an important part of an important percentage of reviews, because a lot of the people that will be reading it are just like you and I without the background to properly critically review things.
That's why I am trying to still give out a quick output of my enjoyment. But I personally do not feel, probably I do not have the confidence to compute in the system and potentially, I don't know, ruin some books' chances or something like that. It's more a personal choice at this point. That's something that I thought about that I had not considered before. But it's totally valuable what you said. And that's why I think it's important that there are authors and publishers that reach out to normal people, so they feel even more inclined to actually review more in depth and give a rating, or just people that want to use star rating. It's very important that there is variety out there, because that's always what makes the world go around, in my opinion.
I love that. I love what you said about variety, especially right there. I love what you're saying in a way, because I think that, well, one, of course, I think you're very valuable as a reviewer, and
Thank you.
you speak very well about the books that you enjoy. I always enjoy hearing your reviews and thoughts on books. And I guess one thing that's coming to my mind, because I know we're just talking as individuals, but there is a huge book community. And there do tend to be what I have just recently described as like hype waves over books. And does it ever make you, or either of you can answer this question, but does it ever make you feel a little strange whenever there's a huge hype wave over a book, and maybe even readers that are like you are rating a book 5 stars, or rate like the rating is very, very high, and you have a total disconnect from that book and didn't give it the same rating? I wondered how that affects you. And maybe a related question would be, do you ever get feedback or comments on how you rate books?
I think I know what I like and I don't like well enough after the fact. I can't predict what I like much, but like, after I've experienced it and read it, enough to be confident in whatever I think, and also knowing that's subject to change based on experiences or new information brought forth. But that just once again happened in a book that made it to my least favorite of the year, that everybody gave 5 stars when it came out. And I was just like, were we reading the same, like, did we read the same book? Like, did we actually read the same book? Because it was so hyped and everyone loved it. But at the end of the day, I was like, I don't care. And I find that actually, there was a couple in that. I find that even if I have an extreme opinion that is different from the most popular opinion, I always get those people that are like, oh my God, thank you. I'm so glad that someone else, felt this way and rated this book this way, which you can do that too. Like, even if you don't have star rating value to go with it, you can still get that type of connection. But I think I don't really care, especially if I don't know, if somebody doesn't have the same general reading taste is me anyways, but I'm usually not too bothered, and my opinions don't typically change based on what other people rate it. Even if they're my best friend, they're like, I hated that. I'm like, oh, I loved it, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally understand that. There are a couple books that come to mind that I read last year, and I feel as though I'm the only person on the planet who didn't quite have the excitement over those books that everyone else did. And it did make me wonder, did we read the same book, or did I read the same book, or maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace? But yeah, that's interesting. And that's also interesting what you said too. I think that that's so true too, that even if you don't like a book that is highly acclaimed on Goodreads, you'll always have that one person who said, "Ah, thank you. I felt the same way you did."
I feel I'm pretty, at this point, notorious, at least from my own point of view, for not liking books that I was expecting to absolutely love and that my friends loved. Just for example, I, guys, forgive me, I do not like Brandon Sanderson at all. I could not stand Mistborn, and I recently DNF'd John Gwynn's Shadow of the God. And Joanna, forgive me, you know all this already, but I also DNF'd Piranesi.
Mhm.
Who am I? You don't have to trust me, but this is what I'm trying to say. It happens and it's fine. And there are other books that, for example, I absolutely hated. And when I was using star rating, I gave 1 star, but people like Brittany love and gave that book 5 star. Book I'm talking about is 9,000. And I perfectly respect her opinion. I also do respect and still am confident in my own experience with the book. It does not mean that one of the rating is or was more valuable than the other one.
Yeah, well, I think that that's fine. Actually, it's funny because I
Yeah.
did talk about Piranesi in my particular video, why I don't recommend these books to everyone, books that I love.
That's
And
true.
I'm always hesitant with that too. And I think that that's also maybe this also is related to why I'm uncomfortable with my own star ratings, is I feel as though my taste probably is, well, and I mean, whose taste is exactly like anyone else's? I know the three of us align on a lot of books,
Yeah.
but the three of us have very different opinions about a lot of books too. And I personally love watching people who have, various opinions on books that don't have to agree with me on everything. But anyway, the star rating thing, it is kind of hard because I know some people will kind of look at a star rating and think, well, that person didn't like it, I'm not going to pick it up, or that person liked it, I have to pick it up. But tastes are much, much more complex, I think. So I think it's always important to know that. Not saying that that's a case against star rating, but just more understanding, of course, that individuals have individual tastes and there can be a lot of variability there.
Can I ask you guys a question then, not using star ratings? You don't have to answer it. Do you think that it's more the reason that you are moving away from it? Is it more due to confusion of how you feel about the book, rating them amongst other things? How do you like actually place that numerical value? Or are you less likely to use it because of the responsibility that comes with like assigning a book a number and having people just see it as that, like you said, leading people to either pick it up or not, or misleading people as they're going into it? Like, do you fall into one of those categories more than the other, or is it?
I think I just do not want to compute in the algorithm of the website. I would not have necessarily a problem with typing it down within my review. But at that point, why not make it my own thing so that I don't need to explain what 1, 2, 3, or 4 star means? That's why I decided to go with a very clear and verbal communication about what was my output of it all and make it as simple and clear as possible. So I did not have to explain it. But my point is, I do not want to compute in the website, in the algorithm, in the web search, and all of that. That was basically, at the end, what made the switch for me worth it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
But
so neither of those really. Neither of
no.
those. Yeah. Okay, that's what I.
That's interesting. I like that answer. Mine's a little more, I don't know. There are a few different reasons why, but most of it comes down to myself because I don't think I've never received real feedback on any of my ratings, or I don't have very many followers on Goodreads or anything like, I don't write a lot of Goodreads reviews anyway. It's more just a place for tracking what books I'm reading when. I just know that I feel like it just feels in my heart reductive to talk about my experience of a book and then reduce it to a number. For me, it just feels like it just takes everything away psychologically for me, as far as like what I'm really trying to convey. I can kind of feel that way if I say 5 stars and I really loved a book, but anything else, it feels like I'm not quite, I don't know why. I feel like my voice is silenced in that number through that reduction. And so it's more just like a personal feeling of silencing in myself. And that probably makes no sense to anybody, but that's sort of what it feels like for me. And another part of it, aside from that reductivity and that feeling of being silenced of something, is also just this the struggle I have with reliability, and the fact that a lot of the books that I love the most are ones that sometimes they don't always hit me right away. Sometimes I don't have an emotional response right away. And that's just the way I am personally. Sometimes I do. Sometimes things will hit me emotionally right away, right in the moment. But sometimes, like, I'm the type of person sometimes in which, like, if somebody dies, I don't cry right away. Like, it takes a while for that to hit me. So it's kind of a mixture of things like that. So the reliability factor feeling kind of confusing to me, my reading taste changing a lot this last year, feeling like I can't really use the same rating system, feeling like I have so many different kinds of aesthetic experiences that don't translate well to a very systematized number. And again, just the feeling of, it just feels kind of like I'm reducing something inside myself when I try to assign a number to a book. So I don't know if that answers your question, Brittany, but those are all the things that are coming up for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys both for those answers. I knew this would be an enlightening conversation just because it's such a personal thing, I suppose. And honestly, like, those two things weren't necessarily at like the forefront of my mind going into this conversation. So I love to hear your guys' perspective on that. That was really great. Those were great answers.
And I also want to say that the conflict I have with this situation, with this issue, is that I do enjoy seeing what my friends rate books. I still look at that. It still has meaning to me, even though I'm saying it shouldn't. It does. It has meaning. It has meaning to me. If I look on Goodreads and I see, Brittany, that you give a book 5 stars, that has meaning to me. If I see, Ola, if you give your new system that you were talking about, if I see that, that's going to have meaning for me. Like, those numbers do have meaning to me. So I don't want to say that they don't, but at the same time, just from a personal, individual perspective, something about it, just the meaning is just confusing from my own perspective when I'm giving a rating. So just to add even more ambiguity to this whole entire topic.
Well, I definitely respect that. And I admire you guys both for being able to say, like, this doesn't feel right for me, and I'm going to do what works best for me moving forward. Because that is brave, to take a step out of the mainstream of what most people do and sort of shift things to what feels best for your experience and your channel. So I admire you guys for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I also want to kind of underline the fact that deciding to keep a sort of highlighted note to let people who enjoy star reading know what my just quick enjoyment was, is because I do find value in having that with star rating or whatever you choose to use. And that's why I'm keeping it, even though I'm stepping away from the star rating specifically, at least for now, because that's what I'm finding is working for me now. And also, one of the things that was kind of really not decisive, but made me think about, was with star rating. Sometimes it's odd seeing 2 books that have clearly a different kind of importance, let's call it, having the same star ratings. Sometimes that's odd. And I don't know, that was always making me feel something is off here. And it makes sense because when you are rating out of a 5-star, it's not that you are taking, okay, from the best of the worst book ever, is more on a tiny, very simple range. And so for me, making it even simpler was the answer, at least for now, as I was saying. But I was wondering if you had that same kind of issues that sometimes scrolling through your read books, you see like a very important book and next something very simple and just enjoyable, and they have the same star rating, and you are okay, what's going on there moment.
I used to really struggle with that because like I'd be rating Malazan if I gave a Malazan book 4 stars and then I gave something that was 200 pages 5 stars and it's a standalone book and you know maybe it was lighthearted or silly or you know satirical, something like that. I'm like, the amount, how do you compare? You can't compare them against one another. So what I had to learn to do was just let go of that and say, I'm only looking at this book right now and thinking about how it made me feel and what I think the rating should be. Because otherwise, yes, I will drive myself insane because then I'm like, I need to reassess everything that I've ever rated because how can this book be rated higher than this book? And I will sometimes have people question that, you know, on my channel. Wait, you gave this book a 5-star and you gave this book a 3-star? And I'm like, yeah, man, like that's just how I feel. But I'm going to talk about it in my review. And I think that's, you know, the why they work okay together because exactly like you said, it's you can't compare. Sometimes even within the same genre, I try to look at what could possibly be the author's intent because I don't know, you know what I mean? I didn't write the book, so I can't say the author intended to do this or make me feel this way because what do I know? But I try to like look at the style of book it is or the writing or, you know, maybe it's not meant to be that deep. Maybe it's not meant to be philosophical. And that's okay. It can still be a 5-star book and have less heavy, dense subject matter, in my opinion. So I try to just like look at one at a time, I think.
Yes, totally. And what you just said about people commenting on how could you rate this, that star rating and that other book as well. It happened to me, not even on my channel. I wrote a comment on a fellow booktuber video and someone of their viewers commented answering my comment, bashing me after going to my Goodreads and checking my star ratings and comparing the books and telling me, I can't trust your comment because you're someone that rated this classic book, I don't know, 4 stars, and that YA fantasy book also 4 stars, so you can't be trusted. Our fellow booktuber, I must say, was the nicest and defended the fact that I can have my opinions and no one should have a say in how I read my books. But it was kind of shocked because, wow, you took that amount of time for this? That's amazing.
That's crazy. I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's ridiculous.
Oh, no, absolutely. I actually, I thought it was an experience, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder, I also don't have to do that, but I wonder if now would be a good time for me to talk about the poll because you guys kind of went over what the reasons are that you're not using star ratings anymore. And I guess I can kind of go over the main reason that I am keeping my star ratings after all, even though that's totally changed since we first started having this conversation a couple months ago, or I don't know when it was, but, so I took a poll for those of you that are watching now on my community tab on YouTube. So 1,400 roughly people voted and 59% said that heck yeah, star ratings are important. So like 60%, only 7% said that the star rating means nothing to them. And then surprisingly, well, I guess, no, 34% said they're indifferent or they don't care if there's a star rating or not. So that's kind of like if I were to predict what I thought would happen, I mean, that's pretty close to it. The majority of the people watching YouTube, at least my channel, want some sort of star rating and the rest don't really care because in a YouTube channel, there is the opportunity to hear someone's thoughts. So there was actually a ton of comments on it too, which were very insightful. I mean, I would say a decent portion of them were viewers saying that star ratings don't really matter very much. but I would say the majority were that a star rating gave someone's initial impression, but it only had value, or they enjoyed it only if there was an explanation to go along with it. But I don't know, I guess I didn't realize as a reviewer online how much star ratings meant to people watching my channel. And so, kind of as I said before, it doesn't make me that uncomfortable. It's frustrating at times for me, but I'm like, I'm not uncomfortable doing it at this point in time. And if I know most people watching, at least like specifically my channel, want it, that's kind of what's made me stick with it for at least now. And I'm going to try to like maybe alter, like by taking away quarter stars and just putting less emphasis on the rating and trying to create more well thought out reviews that are meaningful to go along with that numerical value, so that I have like peace of mind about it, I suppose.
Yeah, well, you already do give very, very thoughtful reviews on the books that you
Yes.
read. Yes, you articulate your thoughts incredibly well, not only on the books that you love, but also the books that you find disappointing. And so it's interesting because, like I said, I'm sort of in this weird place where I do value star ratings as far as my friends are concerned, and seeing like it does have meaning for me when I see people's star rating. And as for myself, I'm just in a place where I don't feel comfortable using star ratings, but yeah, I'm continuing to evolve my thoughts on the topic, which is part of why we're here. And I appreciate what you both had to say so much on this topic. You both gave incredible insights and thoughts. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this topic before we close it?
I would be curious to know, because where I am right now is that I realized that what I value the most is a quick output of your experience, let's call it, for a lack of better words. So I would be very curious to know if people who really care and find star rating really valuable and wish to have them from reviewers would feel the same about any other clear output of your experience with the book, or is because of the star rating and because of the inputting in the database and so the average and all of that. I think that would be an interesting fact to learn about. So maybe
I want to answer that for you, at least from a lot of the responses I got.
Yeah.
Several of them said, and just in past videos and things where I discussed this, the majority of the people said it didn't matter if it was a number value to them. They just wanted some kind of ranking system to show the separation of basically separate from the meaningful review, quick enjoyment factor. So I think like the majority of the people said, doesn't have to be a star, doesn't have to be a number, it could be an emoticon, can be like a level, anything like that. That's what I've come in, that's what I've heard from most people.
I totally see that being the case, because I know that I use that as well.
I know a lot of people do that too. I saw that being a trend last year where people were getting away from stars and trying to use other kinds of systems that had other things. To me, they're the same. They're interchangeable though. Like it's still a ranking system. It's still a value system, no matter how you go about it. Like it's still a value system.
Well, if you're just swapping the star, of course, it's the same. But as I was saying, if you go from a 5 to a 7, 9, 2, 3 tier kind of thing, you are rearranging the levels. And so it can't be really the same. And it can't be inputting in the system. So you're not, I don't know, to me, it actually changes. I don't know why.
It doesn't really change to me. And I know like Andy Smith, he did a system he started a system, which was really cool, where instead of doing things according to like a number of stars, well, his number of stars, instead of it being enjoyment based, this is another example where not everybody uses the system the same way. A lot of people do have differences in the way they use the systems. And that's why it's kind of can be kind of confusing when you look at those individual ratings or even overall average ratings. But he did one where like 5 stars means universal recommend, that he would recommend it to anybody. And 4 stars. I can't remember what the rest of his numbers represented. I would argue that's different for sure. I mean, a 4-star would have, in a way, higher value, I think, than a typical enjoyment 4-star maybe. And at the same time, it's still a value system. You're still saying, if you're universally recommending a book, that
Yeah,
it's
that's why you can use something different from the value. Like I was saying, the emoticons, for example, that's not a value for, but you could use the strawberries, something else, and chocolate.
I feel like the middle, I see where both of you guys are coming from exactly, because I don't feel this, because I think it's because I'm so indifferent about star ratings that I'm just okay with doing what my audience wants. That's why I kind of see where you're coming from and where you're coming from. I see, to Joanna, it still even if it's not a numerical value, it places a different value ranking system. And to Ola, it feels good to you that it's not the same levels, that it's not a number, that it's not part of the system. And I don't know, I completely appreciate and respect both of those separate different opinions. So, if it's not harming anybody, good, just keep doing what makes you feel good. I think that should be the moral of it, because I don't know, I'm happy when other people are comfortable with what they're doing. And if it's not affecting me, then I just want it to be known, if I'm like, I'm doing star ratings, I appreciate and respect everybody that doesn't, and see the value in that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And same here. I mean, some of my best friends are obviously give star ratings on books, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is totally just me evolving my thoughts on the topic. And who knows, maybe someday I'll go back to star ratings. I just know right now it's not working for my brain for the points that I made. And yeah, that's an interesting idea. I will give that some more thought, Ola, about the different kinds of value systems, or how it's not a value system. I'm sorry if I misunderstood. So maybe I'll look into that a little bit more.
We can definitely have a part 2 of all of this.
Or whatever.
Reevaluate in a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. That's so true, that, as long as it's not causing harm to others, that's all that really matters in life, in my opinion. And I think that just about wraps up at least my thoughts for now. So thank you so much for watching. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you use star ratings, if you don't, your feelings about them, if it bothers you, if I don't use star ratings, or if any booktuber doesn't use star ratings, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. We all three would. And thank you to my beautiful, wonderful guests, Brittany and Ola. Always a pleasure to have you here on the channel and talk to you about these kinds of topics.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to reading the comments too. I'm excited to see what people have to say.
Should be interesting. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.